Recording in progress.
And I did hear that recording in progress. So thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to the City of Petaluma regular meeting of the City Council and the Petaluma Community Development Successor Agency for Monday, January 3rd. So we will have a roll call by our Deputy Clerk.
Barrett.
Here.
Barnacle.
Here.
Fisher.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
King.
Here.
McDonald.
Here.
And Posake.
Here.
All members present.
Thank you. And so now we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now we'll have a moment of silence. Thank you. And there are no agenda changes or deletions to today's agenda. And I would just like to announce that at this time, I'm trying to see how many people we have. We have 11 people attending at this time, the Zoom meeting. So with that, we're going to open general public comment, and I will ask our moderator to do that for us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At this point, I'm going to defer to our Deputy City Clerk to see if there is any public comment that came in.
We had 3 public comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm going to start a 30-second timer while I read over my instructions. So we'll see how many hands raised. Those wishing to participate in general public comment must raise a virtual hand and wait to be called on by the moderator. Speakers are reminded to be respectful in their comments. Threats of violence and obscenity are grounds for removal from this meeting. A countdown will appear for the convenience of the speaker and viewers. Your microphone will be muted at the end of that countdown. The first speaker will be acknowledged and invited to speak when the countdown begins. Please make sure to unmute yourself when you're invited to do so. We have 2 public commenters. The first speaker that we have is John Hanania, followed by Eric Leland. John, I will now allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and begin.
Good evening and Happy New Year. You guys put me in such a holiday spirit with your fine words and last meeting. I want to thank you for that. I hope your holiday was good because mine was very good. One of the things that I want to bring out to you, I think you guys deprived the public of their right to participate. You used to have 4 meetings a month and you cut it down to 2. And the public used to speak, they used to be able to speak before the closed session as a general public comment, and you changed that. And I don't understand why is it that you guys just don't want to hear from the public? And when the public says something not to your liking, you mistreat them. I would like to recommend for you and anyone who is listening to go on the police department Yelp, especially you, Mike Healy. And Teresa Barrett, you always say that people have axe to grind. See how many people have an axe to grind with negative comments. How is it that's more than half of the people have nothing but negative things to say? How many of you go around town talking to people to find out how they feel about your staff? When people say anything about your city manager, you guys jump on arm. You know, oh, she's doing a good job. When somebody say anything about your police chief, you guys jump, oh, she's doing a great job. When somebody say anything about your city attorney, you know, Mike Healy, you know, who always thought he's macho man, Randy Savage. Oh, yeah. You know, maybe he forgot that mentality, you know. And I don't understand why you guys don't want to listen to the public. I talk to people all the time around town. They don't want to say anything because they don't want to be treated as you treat me and treat other people in the community. People have a right to speak their mind. And, I don't understand why you guys don't want to interact with the community. Anybody who is not liking what you guys do, you put an X on their name. And I don't understand why, So I hope this year you guys will change your mentality, but I very highly recommend that the issue about public comment should be put in the ballot and the people to decide to how much time they have. Because you guys, when you want, you put it at the end of the meeting. And when there's 7 people, you give them 2 minutes. When it's only 1 minute over 20 minutes. When there's 2 people, you only give them 3 minutes. How come I don't get 10 minutes today? There's only 2 people. So I hope you guys get your act together, and I hope you have a wonderful year.
Your time has expired. The next speaker that we have is Eric Leland. Eric, I'll now allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and begin.
Hi, thank you. And I just wanted to wish the council and staff a happy new year and my appreciation, for all the great work and a ton of work you guys have all been doing last year. And I know that's coming up this year with the great recommendations from the Ad Hoc Advisory Committee, things like cool Petaluma and all the climate action work we're doing, planting trees and so forth. So again, thank you all for the work. I really appreciate it. And I know we haven't agreed on everything all the time, but I know you guys are doing fabulous work. So thank you again and happy holidays.
Madam Mayor, that is the last public speaker that we have.
Thank you for that. And with that, we'll close public comment and go to council comment. And I will start with Council Member McDonald.
Thank you very much. And the only assignment of mine that's met over the holidays between December 20th and today was the council's fairground ad hoc committee, which is trying to come up with a plan to get the public process started again. And I'm looking forward to a city announcement of what it can be real soon. And then I have, of course, my New Year's hopes. It wouldn't be appropriate to start a new year without your hopes. And amongst the many, many things, I just like to hope for our crosstown connector workshop to happen this year. I'm hoping for a grant for the Water Street trestle, and I'm hoping for SMART to deliver on the bike path projects as promised, including that 500-foot gap to Water Street. I know it sounds like the same list I sent to Santa, but I think it really is achievable goals from the city side. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Healy.
Thank you. So I would just add to Councilmember McDonald's wish list that I hope SMART also prioritizes the second Petaluma station. They were quoted in the newspaper as wanting to go to Cloverdale and those areas, but they neglected to talk about our second Petaluma station. And I think it would be politically very smart for SMART to finally fulfill their promise for a second Petaluma station. And I also look forward to daylighting the work of the Fairgrounds Subcommittee in the middle of this month. I had no liaison meetings this month, recently, but I would just say that Lake Sonoma has gone, the water supply pool has gone from 43% 3 months ago to 60% now, which is a nice step in the right direction, but we need more. Thank you.
Well, that is good news, though. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll go to Councilmember King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Happy New Year to everyone. I also attended the Fairgrounds Subcommittee. I don't have anything in addition to add to my 2 colleagues beyond what they said. And I have no other liaison reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Barnacle.
Nothing to report out on. Happy New Year.
Thank you. And Councilmember Fisher.
Thank you. Haven't had any liaison assignments since our last meeting, but I do want to announce and invite everyone to the Cool Petaluma kickoff, which is happening on January 12th. It'll be from 6 to 7 p.m. And if you would go to register at coolpetaluma.org, it's right on our homepage there, and you can find out what else we're up to. And I just want to take a moment to wish everyone a happy new year and celebrate everything we got done last year. And great job.
Thank you. Councilmember Pusake.
I have no liaison appointments to present, and I'll just wish everyone again a happy new year. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I did have 2 meetings with the Air District in the time between our last meeting and today, but no report from those meetings. And I do also want to join the rest of the council in wishing our whole community and staff and the rest of the council a really good new year. And I think Councilmember McDonald was right in using the word hope. I think we are all hopeful. And, I think we just need to work on, no matter what happens, we just have to make the best of it and continue forward. So with that, I'll ask our city manager if she'd like to speak.
Thank you much, Mayor, and Happy New Year to our community and council and staff. We've hit the ground running. This Saturday, we will have our second virtual open house for our district elections. And it's going to be this Saturday from 10 a.m. to noon. And all the meeting information can be found on our website at cityofpetaluma.org/district elections, but you'll also see it on our homepage. And at that open house, you can learn about the districting process, learn how to submit a community of interest form, both in person and online, and how to submit a district map for consideration. So we did that at the first virtual open house, and we'll be doing that again at this one. We'll also have it in English and Spanish as we did last time. And also I wanted to make note for anyone who might be attending tonight's meeting regarding the Sunny Slope Benefit Assessment District. Per a resolution adopted by City Council on December 20th, the canvassing of ballots for the formation of the Sunny Slope Benefit Assessment District scheduled for tonight has been moved to February 28th, 2022. Ballots and further information will be mailed out next week to the property owners within that proposed district. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will move to the approval of minutes. Are there any corrections or comments on the minutes that were submitted for the December 20th meeting? Not seeing anyone raise a hand, the minutes will be approved as submitted. And now we'll go on to approval of the proposed City Council agenda for January 24th. Yes, Councilmember Fisher.
I'd like to move approval of that, please.
Thank you. And do I have a second, Councilmember King?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Fisher and a second by King. And I will ask the city clerk, Deputy City Clerk, to make a roll call vote.
Barrett?
Yes.
Barnacle?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Healy?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
McDonald?
Yes.
And Posake.
Yes.
Vote passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, we're on to the consent calendar. And Councilmember King has already asked to recuse himself on this, and I will call on Councilmember Healy.
Yeah, so I believe Councilmember King and I both need to abstain on item 3D only.
Yes.
And I don't know if that needs to be removed from the calendar and voted on separately, or if we can just note our abstentions and vote.
I believe the protocol will be that you don't have to leave, you can still be visible in the meeting because it's on the consent calendar, but you will just not vote, you and Councilmember King.
So we'll take 3D separately.
So yes, we will vote if there's no other action requiring anything to be removed from the consent calendar. We'll vote on every other item together, and then we'll vote on item 3D. And is that what you wanted to talk about, Councilmember King?
Yeah, I believe we also have to state our reason for recusal, and my reason is that my business is located within the bid district, and I pay the bid annually. So I need
Thank you very much. And Councilmember Healy?
Same reason.
Same reason. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I will ask our Deputy City Clerk if she's received any items from the public on any of these items on the consent calendar.
No comments, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So I will ask our moderator to see if there's anybody in attendance who wants to speak to any of the items on the consent calendar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Those wishing to participate in public comment must raise their virtual hand and wait to be called on by the moderator. Speakers are reminded to be respectful in their comments. Threats of violence and obscenity are grounds for removal from this meeting. A countdown will appear for the convenience of the speaker and viewers. Your microphone will be muted at the end of that countdown. The first speaker will be acknowledged and invited to speak when the countdown begins. Please make sure to unmute yourself when you're invited to do so. Just a reminder, this is for the consent calendar. And Madam Mayor, it does not look like we have any public speakers.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, we will close public comment on the consent calendar. And I will look for a motion for items 3A, B, C, E, and F. And I see Councilmember King has his hand up.
Yes, I'll move those 5 items, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And Councilmember Fisher?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
So there's a motion and a second for items 3A, B, C, E, and F. And when we have a roll call vote.
Barrett?
Yes.
Barnacle?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Healy?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
McDonald?
Yes.
And Posake.
Yes.
The vote passes unanimously.
Thank you. And now I'm looking for a motion on item 3D, and I see Councilmember Fisher has her hand up.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and move approval of 3D.
Thank you. And Councilmember McDonald?
I'd like to second that.
Okay, so we have a motion by Fisher and a second by McDonald. Can we have a roll call vote by the Deputy City Clerk?
Barrett?
Yes.
Barnacle?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Healy?
Abstain.
King?
Abstain.
McDonald? Right.
Yes.
And Posake.
Yes.
Thank
Okay. Go ahead, Deputy Clerk. Do you want to read the result?
Yes, the vote passes unanimously with King and Healy recusing.
Thank you very much. And with that vote, we now have appointed Councilmember Dennis Posake as the Vice Mayor for 2022. So I want to thank current Councilmember Barnacle for his year of service, and welcome Vice Mayor Posake to that position. So as we move on now to item 4A, which is the liaison reports. And at this point, I would just like to say we now have 19 people in our Zoom audience. So with the liaison report, appointments, I will hand that over to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe, and Sam, do you want to pull up, Mayor, the list of the liaison?
No, I'm not sure that we regularly do that. I just think it's, an announcement that we are, rotating those assignments as people have requested on the council, and they will be going forward for the next year. So I don't know that we need to necessarily pull that up, but if you'd like to. So,
just want to make sure that that was transparent and that everybody knows that that is an attachment in the staff report, and that's listed. So all the new and current assignments. So if the mayor and council wish, we can vote on that.
Thank you. So I'll look for if there's any comment on the part of the council on this item. Not seeing any, I will ask the city, I see the vice mayor has his hand up. Vice Mayor Posake.
Yes, no, I was just going to move that we accept that if we needed that.
I'll take that motion, but I want to see if there's any public comment on this item as well.
Okay.
So I will ask the Deputy City Clerk if she's received any items on this issue.
No comments on this item.
Thank you. And I will ask our moderator to see if there's anyone in the public who would like to speak to this issue.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Those wishing to participate in public comment must raise their virtual hand and wait to be called on by the moderator. Speakers are reminded to be respectful in their comments. Threats of violence and obscenity are grounds for removal from this meeting. A countdown will appear for the convenience of the speaker and viewers. Your microphone will be muted at the end of that countdown. The first speaker will be acknowledged and invited to speak when the countdown begins. Please make sure to unmute yourself when you're invited to do so. The first speaker that we have is Sheila Baker. Sheila, I will now allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and begin.
Hello and thank you. Good evening, City Council, Vice Mayor, and Mayor. Thank you. I just want to say how happy I am to see Councilmember King's name next to Transit Advisory Committee Liaison. I think that's, I really appreciate that a lot. I think Councilmember King is, really on the right mindset of moving toward really good routing for Petaluma Transit for 2022 and beyond. And that's one of the biggest issues that we have, I think, in transit, that we've got fancy buses, but they kind of don't go far enough. And we have lots and lots of students riding buses, and there's a lot of fuss over that. The students, rightfully so, and I'm glad that we do that, but we also need to serve the general public. So I'm looking forward to seeing more routes, and I know that they're in challenging areas or maybe developments in the future, but it's going to happen. And thank you, everybody, and thank you, Councilmember King, for being in that spot. Thanks.
Madam Mayor, that is the last speaker that we have.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will close comment on item 4A. And we have a motion by Posake, and I will call on Councilmember Fisher.
Yeah, for a second to the Vice Mayor's motion.
Okay, so we have a motion by Posake, second by Fisher, and I will ask for a roll call vote.
Barrett?
Yes.
Barnacle?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Healy?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
McDonald?
Yes.
And Posake.
Yes.
Vote passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. And so with that, we're going on to new business item 4B, which is review and accept the existing conditions report and associated summary presented to inform subsequent policy development as part of the general plan update. And I will call on Heather Hines.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Happy New Year to everybody. Happy to be here. I am here with David Garcia, who's an associate planner, and Ron Whitmore with Ramey and Associates. And we're happy to provide an update on what we've been up to with the general plan update and get your feedback on the existing conditions report. So I'm gonna start the presentation off, and Ron and I are going to kind of pass it back and forth, and then we're here to answer questions and help with any conversation. So thank you, David. Wait for that to come up. There we go. Okay, so really our objectives for this evening are to provide you with an overview of the general plan update and the community engagement, really to share some of the feedback that we have heard on the existing conditions report as we've gone to the different committees and commissions, the General Plan Advisory Committee, as well as comments we've received from the public. And then really to discuss how the key findings from all of that information in the existing conditions report will inform next steps in the general plan update. I do want to everyone in the audience that the planpetaluma.org website is a great way to see documents, provide feedback, and sign up for updates. Next slide, please. Okay. So council consideration, I do want to point out that there is not an action for the council to take tonight. We are here to update you on the process and solicit input and feedback from both the council and the public. What we're really interested in is, given all of the information in the existing conditions reports and the summary presentation, what issues or questions come up for you that you think the general plan should address. So this is really our springboard to our conversations about vision, about land use alternatives, about policy development and programs. So I'm gonna pass it over to Ron Whitmore with Ramey and Associates to kind of talk a little bit about the general plan update and the process. Ron?
Thank you, Heather, and good evening and Happy New Year, City Council members. As Heather noted, I'm going to briefly provide you a status update on the General Plan Update project. In the interest of time, and because many of you have already heard similar versions of this update during recent committee and commission meetings or other project events, this is going to be a very high-level brief update. First of all, the project is more than just a general plan update. It also includes a climate action and adaptation plan that builds on the city's climate emergency framework. They are being done in tandem to ensure that the two are complementary and consistent. Importantly, the planning process also builds on recent city planning like the ULI Technical Assistance Report and the Local Hazard Mitigation Plan update. It's also being done in coordination with ongoing planning projects like the VMT thresholds and the Bike and Ped Master Plan update. And as required by law, the project also includes an EIR. This is a multi-year project, and we're still early in the planning process. I believe the last time the project was on a council agenda was in early 2021, which launched the project initiation phase. The discovery phase began early last summer, and its work products, a variety of existing conditions reports and white papers, are the focus of tonight's meeting. In August, we also launched the public visioning phase, which will conclude with the City Council's consideration of the general plan vision and guiding principles early this year. Initial public input during this last year also will inform the alternatives phase, which will conclude with the City Council adopting a land use policy map to guide the city's future development. And then we will build on the discovery, visioning, and alternatives work to prepare a complete policy framework for the general plan, which will be the foundation for the final product. As I'm sure you're familiar, general plan updates are a great deal of work. This slide gives you a high-level sampling of some of the major work products. At a minimum, we'll return to the City Council at the conclusion of each phase to provide updates. And as the city's policy-making body, the council will be asked to approve each major interim policy product and will adopt the final updated general plan. Naturally, public outreach and engagement are a major focus of this project. During each phase, community members have and will continue to have a variety of opportunities to shape the plan. There will be a mix of meetings, workshops, surveys, forums, and other opportunities to provide input and help shape each project deliverable. We also rely very heavily on the General Plan Advisory Committee that was appointed by the City Council. We've been meeting monthly, and GPAC members have done an excellent job of advising the planning team and assisting in the development and review of interim work products. As Heather mentioned, for more detailed information about the project, its status, and engagement activities, we encourage you to dive into planpetaluma.org. And again, when we come back to the council later this winter, we'll provide much more information about recent public engagement that informed development of the draft vision and guiding principles. So we'll be saying much more about the recent engagement activities, including area meetings, a workshop, pop-ups, etc., as a way to introduce the draft visioning. Heather, would you like to take over here?
Yep, I will take over this section. And I do, just for members of the public, the General Plan Advisory Committee meets on the third Thursday of each month at 6:30. Is that correct, Ron? 6:30? I think it's 6:30. And that is a great way for people to participate, hear the discussions that are happening by that advisory committee, make public comment, and stay engaged. So it's really an exciting time with what the General Plan Advisory Committee is going to be diving into coming up in terms of that visioning report and the land use alternatives. And it's a great way to stay involved.
Heather, this is the mayor. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but we didn't really establish how you would like to hear from the council as you are looking for comments or input from the council. And I wanted to know if you'd like people to raise their hand as we go along, or do you want us to save it up?
I can, at your discretion, I'm going to go over a little bit about what the existing conditions are, the purpose of them, kind of a summary of how we've been reviewing the comments. And then we're really going to wrap it up and turn it over for discussion. But if there is something, burning on anything we're touching on, I'm happy to pause and answer a question.
Okay, fine. That should be appropriate.
Okay. So, looking at the role and scope of the existing conditions report. So the existing condition report comprehensively is made up of 19 different reports, and these cover a range of topics to be covered in the general plan. It's an analysis of the existing conditions in Petaluma to provide a data-based foundation that will inform the planning process that we are undertaking. But it's not a policy document. It is a snapshot of time, and it does not limit what we can discuss as we move into the visioning and the policy development. So I want to make sure that everyone's clear on that this isn't adopting the policy. It's not adopting the vision. It's not limiting what we can talk about, but it's trying to compile all of that existing data from our existing plans and resources and studies in one place. And it is a culmination of that initial discovery phase, as Ron pointed out, and that is an important but initial phase of this larger project. So they are limited in scope. It's focusing on gathering existing data. It is not scoped to develop new technical analyses or modeling. And it is a foundation, but it is a foundation that's going to be complemented by the community-based visioning efforts to identify those key priorities, those key visioning exercises, and that policy development. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, there were 19 existing condition reports and white papers that were developed by Ramey and Associates and their subconsultants. So as outlined in the staff report, the Ramey team has a nice bench of subconsultants with expertise in these different areas. So these were developed in the summer of 2021. And this gives you a list of kind of the breadth of what these condition reports covered. So when the draft existing conditions reports were completed, we did publish them on the website along with a summary presentation. It is a lot of information. So the summary presentation was meant to provide another way to get those kind of key findings and takeaways from the many pages that go into the reports. We then went to all of our committees and commissions. And this is kind of a list of where we've been over the last couple months of the year. So when we did go to each of the committees and commissions, we presented both an overview of the general plan update, kind of a refresher of What are we doing? Why are we doing it? What are we required to do? What do we have we identified as priorities thus far? Talked about the community engagement. And then we really explored the existing condition report that was particular to that committee or commission's purview, or if there wasn't a clear match, we would kind of look at the condensed overview of the ECR summary presentation. And this really provided an opportunity for each of the committees and commissions to stay engaged, to know where we were in the process, how they could be involved, offer their comments. It also gave an opportunity for different community groups and members of the public to participate in that discussion and provide feedback. So in addition to identifying any omissions or errors in the reports, it also was an opportunity to start generating that initial input as to where policy direction is likely to go as a result of the data that was gathered in the existing condition reports. So as we've been receiving information, we found that they fell into a couple different categories: questions and clarifications, comments about information that people felt like was missing from the reports, ideas for actions and programs, and suggestions for integration of topics and elements across multiple discussions. So looking at each one of those individually, questions and clarifications, there's a lot of comments we received about language, modifications to language to accurately reference existing conditions, to clarify when we're referring to an adopted, what is said in an adopted plan versus what is actually on the ground. The Rainier Crosstown connector was a good example of this. And was commented on in the transportation existing condition report, that the language was not factual enough in that it is called for in the existing general plan, but there was some assumptions or language that felt like an assumption of the future of the Rainier Crosstown connector. So those are things we're looking at and making changes to the language to make sure that they accurately reflect what is referenced in our existing plans. Also, comments about references to data in other plans. So for instance, tree species are referenced in the River Access and Enhancement Plan. So there was comments that in the natural resources under trees, that those species should specifically be called out as existing in the River Access and Enhancement Plan. So that's another type of topic that we're looking at, and looking at what the reference is and whether that should be corrected in the existing conditions report. Another topic was missing information. So sometimes this was requests for or comments about additional detail. One of the references for this was in the Parks and Rec existing condition report. There is a table that identifies all the existing parks. And there was a request that the existing amenities in those existing parks be included, because it was a very helpful tool to kind of more than just understanding what parks exist, but what park amenities exist. And we have that information in a recent facility evaluation. So incorporating that. Maps, there was a request for additional adding or referencing existing maps and graphics from other planning efforts. The tree canopy was one that was referenced several times. And while the city does not have an exhaustive tree inventory, Relief has some canopy maps of existing canopy. So looking at where we can utilize other data sources to complement the existing conditions report. We're looking into that. But one of the things the existing conditions report don't do is new modeling or new studies. So one example of this, a concern was raised about in the sea level rise existing or white paper, that the sea level rise modeling only goes, I think it's Washington Creek, doesn't go further north. And that's because that is the scope of the existing sea level rise modeling. So while that isn't something within the scope of the existing condition report to do new or additional modeling, it is something that we will consider in that feedback. And we have been working with both the Ramey consultant team and the city's consultant for our future flood modeling to see how we can bring those specialists together to talk about how we can best scope out that flood modeling in the future. Ideas for actions and programs. So a lot of the feedback that we got when we went to the different committees and commissions was about information that came up in these existing conditions report and things that people felt like we needed to really focus on as we move forward. So while that doesn't necessarily result in a change to the existing conditions report, those comments are not wasted. We are compiling those. We are keeping track of those and feel like they're a great springboard to the upcoming conversations that we're preparing for in terms of land use alternatives and policy development. So this is things like, why are so many people commuting into or out of Petaluma, and how do we get better jobs, housing balance, so we can lessen that? How do we preserve and expand the tree canopy? How do we make sure we're minimizing development in flood-prone areas? These are some of the types of ideas for actions and programs and feedback that came through as a result of these existing condition report. And obviously the climate emergency framework, Appendix A of the climate emergency framework, was really a list of things, of actions and programs that we will be considering and incorporating into the general plan and climate action plan as we move forward. And finally, suggestions for integration. So there's a real awareness that so many things overlap, and it's important to think of things through that lens, consider topics that span different elements in the general plan. And again, trees have come up, and trees being part of a discussion about parks and open space, our biological resources, reducing greenhouse gas, environmental justice, all of those topics are touched by tree canopy. So really bringing the focus to that, and also thinking about how, as we move into the policy framework and development of this general plan, how do we think about overlapping priorities? So for instance, historic preservation being a key character and priority in Petaluma, but also some of the data from the greenhouse gas inventory really acknowledges that existing buildings are a huge contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. So how do we make sure we're preserving those existing buildings as being an important part of our community, and think of ways and prioritize ways to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from those buildings? So in summary, the Ramey team and staff are reviewing all the comments we've received from all the committees, the commissions, members of the public, and we're really prioritizing the changes that need to be made to the existing conditions report. And we are also cataloging those comments as appropriate for consideration during later phases, as really to inform those conversations. So again, just touching on the point that the existing condition report, we will be making changes to it. We have not done incremental changes along the way. The idea was to compile all of them, to look at them and confirm, which were within the scope of the existing conditions report, which weren't, but we should be thinking about in later phases, and reminding people this is not a policy document. This is being received by the council, but not a formal adoption. And this really forms the foundation for where we're going next, but it doesn't preclude the discussion. And I'm going to hand it back to Ron to talk about next steps, and then we'll wrap it up for discussion with the council.
Thank you, Heather. You can advance the slides, David. So quickly, just to recap, coming up next, as Heather just noted, we're going to be revising ECRs to reflect the omissions, inaccuracies that Heather highlighted and provided examples of. And as has been the case throughout the process, publishing all of the final drafts of those reports online. And importantly, they are a critical foundational piece for the planning team moving forward. So we'll be referencing them continually as we proceed through the planning process. And then again, just as revisiting the planning process itself, we're wrapping up the visioning phase as well. We'll be coming back to you again soon for you to consider the draft vision and guiding principles. Concurrently, we're also working diligently on the housing element, and we'll be coming back to you as well to focus on some issues raised by the site inventory as well as other components of the housing element. Both those and the discovery work, as we've noted, are the foundation for the alternatives phase, which is the next phase, which will be starting in the coming months. And all of that together will come together in the comprehensive policy framework work coming later this year. Next slide, please, David. And so again, as Heather noted at the beginning, of course, we're interested in questions, comments, feedback, thoughts related to the key findings or other even specific details in some of these existing conditions reports. But as the policy-making body for the city, we're also very interested in your direction. And specifically, given some of the key findings in these existing conditions reports and white papers, what should the general plan really focus on? What questions do we absolutely need to grapple with and address in the general plan update? What do you want to make sure we really solve with this general plan update for Petaluma? So we're very interested in your thoughts on those high-level, forward-thinking questions as it relates to what's coming up next with the planning process. We're available now to answer any questions and support your deliberations and discussion.
Okay, thank you very much for that overview, and we'll kick it off with Councilmember Fisher.
Thank you very much. Don't have any questions. I did prepare for this back in October when I had a planning commission meeting on it and submitted comments via the Climate Action Petaluma group today. So I actually prepared for this by reading the existing conditions overview, and I had a number of questions about those slides, so I'll submit those separate. But I think in looking at these existing condition reports through the lens of our goal of climate neutrality by 2030, my concern is, and my observation is that what we're measuring and how we're measuring it isn't going to give us the baseline data that we need to know what we need to do to get to where we need to go. So when you look at how we consume energy, how we consume goods, while the information is there, it's not in a format, I think, that's going to serve us with that baseline data as we develop our plans. So that's my biggest concern. And then the other observation I had is that we don't really, in combination with that, a lot of these, we don't go deep enough. Like when we talk about multi-use paths, for instance, we have some that are in horrible condition. We have some that can't even be accessed, but we don't have an inventory of what those paths actually look like. So if we want to increase active transportation modes, then we need to know how many bike lanes do we actually have? How many, protected bike lanes do we have? I think it's 0. But really calling out that infrastructure so that we can measure our improvements over the years, so that we can actually meet our goals. Yeah, I'll start with that.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who has anything they'd like to say at this time before we hear from the public? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone raise a hand, so I will ask our Deputy City Clerk if she's received any correspondence on this item.
We've received 4 comments, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And then I will ask our moderator to see if there's anybody in the Zoom audience who would like to speak on this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Those wishing to participate in public comment must raise their virtual hand and wait to be called on by the moderator. Speakers are reminded to be respectful in their comments. Threats of violence and obscenity are grounds for removal from this meeting. A countdown will appear for the convenience of the speaker and viewers. Your microphone will be muted at the end of that countdown. The first speaker will be acknowledged and invited to speak when the countdown begins. Please make sure to unmute yourself when you're invited to do so. The first speaker is M. Sullivan, I will now allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and begin.
Yes, good evening. I would ask that the city council members not accept the existing condition reports as written. I've reviewed a number of the reports in depth, and there are a number of gross omissions and inaccuracies. I've sent detailed comments along to city staff. Critically, the existing condition reports must accurately reflect existing conditions, i.e. what is, and not the opinions or desires of the consultants and staff. We're beyond fortunate to have a river access and enhancement plan funded and vetted by numerous scientific experts. In far too many of the existing condition reports, they poorly reflect current city policy and in fact violate Petaluma policy and even regulatory agencies' policy. If the ECRs are not accurate and don't reflect existing city policy as well as the public's vision and values, we then do not have a strong or legitimate base on which to build the GP going forward. As I hope you all realize, these documents need a great deal more work. They need to be corrected such that they are accurate and factual. So I would ask that you don't accept these reports until you see the changes made by Heather Hines, as she alluded to. Thank you kindly.
The next speaker that we have is Bev, followed by Sonoma County Conservation Council. Bev, I'll now allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and begin.
Okay, I wanted to ask you to take the public comments on the existing conditions reports with the seriousness with which they have been offered. The existing conditions reports are like a map, and if a map is incorrect, we will not be able to get where we want to go, no matter how elaborate the map. I was very happy just now to hear Heather Hines' explanation that it is important to do new modeling to go beyond the existing conditions reports. And I think that idea needs to be included in the reports. You've been presented with the science regarding our river habitat. With climate change, we cannot only look to the past. We must look to the future and our ability to make projections, knowing that we are living in a changing world and that it is our actions that will determine our future. If a house is on fire, it doesn't help for the firefighters to go to the last house that was on fire or to use the techniques that worked on a different type of fire. So even though the existing conditions reports rely on historical data, that does not mean that we should rely on historical data to determine future policies and strategies. And I just had one little language kind of comment too, which is in terms of language and scope, land is referred to as vacant, but it is no more vacant than your house is or your garden is. It is inhabited by myriad creatures who are all part of the web of life. It is a web, not discrete pieces. We could carefully remove someone's liver, brain, and heart, but no matter how carefully we did that, the person would cease to live. So, we need to look at the river and our home as a living system and respect its needs in that way. We need wildlife corridors, river corridors, and to protect the oak savanna, riparian forest, and grasslands. So it's not just about what people need. So thank you, everyone, for being here.
The next speaker that we have is Sonoma County Conservation Council, followed by John Hanania. Sonoma County Conservation Council, I'll now allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and begin.
Thank you. This is Susan Kirks. I'm just using the council platform to attend your meeting this evening. I was one of the individuals who sent comments in, and I sincerely hope that there will be at least one or two elected officials who will review my comments and take them seriously, especially related to provision of accuracy and adequate information, particularly in our natural environment, which encompasses everything. The natural environment section for the general plan update it is where we live, and it is where everything will be occurring. And I appreciated the comments that were submitted by the other individuals for this agenda item. I did want to make an observation, and I hope this is helpful, especially for the newer council members. The submission by Climate Action Petaluma seemed thorough, but a lot of the people involved with that particular group may not have a depth of understanding of history of our natural environment here in Petaluma. It would be extremely unwise to remove the rural residential designation in peripheral areas around Petaluma, and that directly relates to the natural environment and our biological resources. And I don't know, just reading through the comments, I thought this reflects the awareness of someone who probably has lived in Petaluma for maybe 10 years or less. And I think there has to be a way where all of us in the community, those of us who have many, many years of dedicated work for our environment, are able to communicate and collaborate in the best interest of the community and our natural resources. So I really appreciate that Ms. Sullivan, Ms. Obaid, Ms. Alexander often come to your meetings, make very substantive comments, are doing their homework. And I really hope, as I said, that maybe one or two council members will take this seriously and require that the accuracy that is being provided to the city by volunteers be included. Lastly, I would just like to briefly say that the wildlife corridor issue is a pretty serious one, and the information in your existing conditions report is literally completely incorrect. Thank you.
The next speaker that we have is John Hanania. I will now allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and begin.
All right. First of all, I want to say thank you to the three speakers who spoke before me. And I'd just like to bring to your attention, I do believe what Heather Heim said, if I'm pronouncing her name right. One of the biggest problem it has been with the city of Petaluma City Council, not just you guys, it can go back years and years and years ago. Whenever a member of the community have a passion about an issue, and they take the time to investigate on their own and find out what's been reported to you by your staff or by someone you have hired, and you paying them, it's different. You have always taken the staff or whoever you have hired word over somebody who have a passion about the topic and took the time and the effort, and you don't believe it. And again, I will go back to what I said about the duck. No matter who says to you that little bird in the pond, it looks like a duck, swim like a duck, it quack like a duck, but if the staff or someone you're paying tell you no, it's an eagle, you automatically believe it's an eagle. And I don't understand how is that. Maybe perhaps some of you can shed some light into let the public know where you guys
Mr. Hanania, I just want to remind you that this item is on review and accepting the existing conditions report and the presentation for the general plan update. So just keep your comments to that. Thank you. I'll allow you to speak again.
Thank you for interrupting me. And I believe I was talking about that. And I believe I was pointing out that the city council never listened to what the public said. But I do agree with the three speakers who spoke before me, especially Heather Heim. And I think you guys need to take into consideration when people bring stuff to you that you need to look into that. Thank you. I'll yield my time.
The next speaker that we have is Veronica O. Veronica, I'll now allow you to speak. You gotta mute yourself and begin.
Hi, good evening, council and city staff and community. I just wanted to, I have submitted some comments on several of the committees and commissions, but I just wanted to make kind of a bigger picture kind of comment. And that is when we're looking at these, our general plan update, and we're looking at how we're going to create carbon neutrality, I would like to know how are we going to make the language in the existing conditions kind of represent some of the ideas that are being asserted in portions of the documents. So there's some incongruence between what is said about what our climate goals are, and then we talk about new roads, new road structures, our land use patterns. Some of them still talk about having areas like the North and South Petaluma Boulevard, even though our ULI report never said those areas. So I'm just trying to figure out why those keep popping up in the existing conditions, and are we going to have a discussion about where exactly we're focusing on, and is that part of the existing conditions, or is that something that we're looking at later? So just looking at the consistencies within the existing conditions and our climate goals and our issues and opportunities going forward. Thank you so much.
The next speaker that we have is Taryn Abaid. Taryn, I'll now allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and begin.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, everyone. These reports were a lot of work for the City Council to review in just 4 days, according to the Brown Act. But I would submit that probably at least 5 times is challenging to the public who aren't prepped like the City Council, aren't trained like staff, and really are not immersed in government or policy or process work. I've read many of these reports over the past few months and submitted volumes of comments into what I feel is basically a black hole, a black box, I should say. Where did they go? Where are they? How do I know that somebody caught them on the other end after I sent them? I feel like perhaps there should be mention in an existing conditions report, which I think is out of the scope of Ramey and Associates. It really goes to our city, of public outreach. We're not leveraging technology in order to have efficient outreach, because this is a lot of work and it's not very encouraging to the public when it's discouraging to not have your efforts really be confirmed or, as being heard, let alone considered and acted on. The other comment I wanted to make is I think I've heard from ex-Mayor Glass that our zoning trumps the general plan. And so I'd like to be sure that we're having some capture here that, according to many city council members and the staff, our zoning has holes in it. Our codes have multiple holes in them. People refer to them at City Hall as Swiss cheese. And what good does it do if we move from existing conditions to, delivering $2 million, is it $3 million of our money for general plan work when they've got no teeth. I asked in a prior GPAC meeting, city staff, is that part of the scope here? Are we gonna tighten up the Swiss cheese and get some codes that actually are meaningful for enforcing our general plan? And they said, no, we're not. And so I wonder, can we at least acknowledge that in the existing conditions report, that does need to be done, because that's been a problem, an existing condition for our city. Thank you.
And Madam Mayor, that is the last public commenter we have.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, we will close public comment on this item and bring it back to discussion at the council. I see Councilmember Barnacle has his hand up, so we'll start with you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you to all the people who put in a lot of work to put these together. It was a great read over the break. I have several comments, and I'll send some of them back. Some of them are questions. I'll send them into staff afterwards. Some of them are more questions. Some of them are more directional, I would say. I have them, to the extent that I can, they're organized by document. So on transportation, I would like to see some mention of Corona in there, considering it's a PDA and we're looking at putting our second train station there. And that is an existing condition that I think should be included in the transportation document. The discussion of micromobility in transportation really kind of focused on new emerging micromobility services, but ownership, micromobility ownership, owning an e-bike, owning an e-scooter, those are on the rise way more than the micromobility services. And I'd like to see a lot more emphasis on what the implications for the growth projections of those technologies look like. I mean, some of the projections around e-bikes are like 100% year-over-year growth for the next 5 years. What does that look like in Petaluma? What does that look like in, or at least acknowledge those trends. We heard it at our last meeting about speeding being a real issue around safety, and AB 43 wasn't mentioned in the legislative context for the transportation section, so I'd like to see that included. And then on page 49 of the staff report presentation that was included, it mentions that we need to have a discussion about east-west connections. So I think that it just again sort of goes to Councilmember McDonald's New Year's resolution, and hope that we get back to having that discussion so that we can give the general plan team some direction on what we think there. On Parks and Rec, I've sent in a bunch of comments already, but really there just is a lot more that needs to be done on the Parks and Rec ECR. It's inadequate from the standpoint of programming. It does not look at equity. Making statements like Petalumans have good access to parks without looking at the actual amenities in those parks. It's equity on the surface, but it's not real equity because not everything's equal on that. I really appreciate Heather Hines' comments earlier about the wording and caveating things, whether they're included in the plan or whether they're actually there on the ground. Please do that. And I want to just also, while I'm on this, really put an asterisk next to what Karen Obaid said about when people give comments, and they've been pouring their effort into that it's so important for them to see what they've said when the documents come to a meeting like this, because otherwise it's really disheartening to spend hours reading these as a member of the public and then come here and not see your comments incorporated and wonder if they ever will be. So I really think that that's important if we want people to show up and participate and put their reservations and their fears aside and be productive participants, that we do that for them. My favorite in all of the reports was in the arts, where it said, overall, the portrait reflects aspects of Petaluma's creative community. Petaluma is less institutional, less formative, and more community-based. I really embody, I think that we do embody that. In the arts, we didn't really talk about some of our music venues, but we have some really amazing music venues here. And as a patron, I'd like to see some mention of our music community represented both in the Parks and Rec, but also especially in the arts. On the environmental justice section, I think that we really focused on exterior factors like air quality from vehicle travel and things like that. And with a growing renter population and the pressure on landlords for deferred maintenance, we need to start thinking about environmental justice inside the home in addition to outside the home. Things like mold, asbestos, lead paint, indoor air quality from gas stoves with no ventilation systems, things like that, because that's the future. That's where we need to look at. So having some assessment of, it's good to see how many renters we have. It'd be nice to have a conversation in the environmental justice section about some of the hazards that renters face, the fear of retaliation, the reality of retaliation, and acknowledging that those are very real. On the land use section, appreciate the emphasis on creatives. Would really like to see, and I love seeing all the different plans and priority development areas overlaid. At some point we need to get more, and maybe this is the next phase, into like what our strategy is with that, and how we, and more of a discussion about what getting to carbon neutrality looks like with respect to land use and transportation. I mean, it's the elephant in the room, and the whole climate section talked about existing buildings, but that's, 25% of our emissions, and, we're going to grow. So I really think that the implications of trying to reach carbon neutrality in less than 10 years is, from a land use standpoint, I'd love to see more on that. And that sort of jumps me to the utility section. The implications of getting to carbon neutrality means we're going to be decommissioning a whole mess of gas lines. And how are we going to do that? Needs to be written in there, or at least that we have all these gas lines in the next 10 years, we're going to decommission all of them. That's what we said we wanted to accomplish. We at least should have a conversation in there about massive stranded assets or assets that can be repurposed for broadband, for recycled water, what have you. But we need to, that's an existing condition that's going to change dramatically over the next couple of years if we do things right. In the demographics, one of my questions, where did the growth projections come from?
Yes, I don't have the report open in front of me, but my guess is either State Department of Finance or MTC ABAG, which I assume probably started from Department of Finance projections, but I can confirm that for you too.
Okay, that's helpful. Just to feel like they were pulled a little bit out of thin air. My concern with our growth projections for Petaluma is that they're too low. I know that there's a lot of people out there that are probably pulling their hair out hearing me say that, but when you look at the county's RHNA numbers over the next 8 years, compared to what Petaluma has, and the fact that we're the southernmost city in Sonoma County, and that we've got a lot, we're trying to build up our retail sector and make it more resilient. I really think we should bring into the existing conditions report not just our growth trends, but the county's growth trends and what the county's housing goals are supposed to be relative to ours, what the implications of that would be for climate. I mean, if the county increases their RHNA numbers, I think it was like 9,000%, right? Like, what is that for climate? What is that, and what is our obligation if we're being good regional community stewards to take on more housing and look at ways to bolster our local economy. And then maybe more, I'd like to see what I would consider, maybe it's an opinion, but I certainly would like to see more historical context about our growth and really kind of, you know, maybe there's like a whole nother report of like, what did we do right in the last general plan and what did we screw up? Because that's what that's as I think about, you know, over the next year, 2 years and making a decision to finalize a new general plan, what I really want to know is what has made Heather's job really hard and what would help her do her job better. And what sends the, you know, clear signals to developers of where we want things, where we want growth, where have we tied our hands and made it harder for ourselves. And, you know, that I think that's it's almost the executive summary of like, you know, what do we want to continue with and what do we want to change? And it probably, you know, Heather's probably the best lead author, and I know she's got all kinds of extra time. So, but it would be really helpful to hear that. You know, some of the pieces that you put in there about the urban growth boundary on land use, I think that until we send a clear signal of our transportation priorities, in particular with crosstown connectors, and like we have to do those two things in unison. You know, for instance, like personally, I would entertain a UGB extension over by Corona Station because of its proximity to the train station. But if the council doesn't think that updating Corona is a priority and we still think that Rainier should be built, then it's incredibly irresponsible to do that. And so we need to have that crosstown connector workshop soon and so that it can be factored into the policy direction that goes into our general plan. Because it's going to be really uncomfortable if we're put with decisions that are, you know, it's a transportation decision and not a land use and transportation decision. So there's a lot more integration that needs to happen there, and really leadership from the council, I think. And then the final thing is we don't really talk about freight, and I know it's pretty small right now, but with the demand for industrial and the trying to make smart viable, I think it would be great to think about what opportunities there are to better leverage those tracks. And I'll pause there. There might be other things that come up, but that's some of my initial comments.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think all of us, having read through this, could probably, you know, go on all evening individually about the things. It's a great presentation. It's a great set of documents. You know, the big finish depends on these foundations. So thanks for all the hard work from staff, from the committees, and from the public who put in their comments as well. And I'll back that comment from Council Barnacle about submitting all the questions and comments tonight so that we're not here answering and researching everything on the spot. Also back Councilperson Barnacle regarding the need to start addressing the Corona overpass, how that fits into our system. And I'll also make a guess as to what we did wrong in the past 10 years, which I think is we starved the city budget and then we didn't adapt to changing conditions. I mean, we couldn't even update the bicycle master plan due to resources and foresight of priority. But so much of this, you know, I'd like to know how the existing conditions measure up against the aspirations and policies of the old general plan. I mean, I think we wanted so much just to see the future and do the perfect plan, but it tends to get bogged down in reality of all the actions happening. I am a little concerned that the ideas for action on page 6 of the staff report, they don't include much in the way of housing ideas. As you drill down, you certainly get the feel from the later PowerPoint section that housing is given great concern and the affordability necessary and things, but we don't see that up in the ideas of the staff report. And I'm wondering if that's some sort of disconnect between the technical expertise and the public interest. I think the public has a great interest right now in climate, and we don't really connect that having the housing is a equally key priority. I'd like to see a better mention of trying to figure out more on funding, housing the homelessness, subsidies needed for affordable programs. When we get into the PowerPoint, the housing slides on rent burden, they're powerful. And that needs to rise to the top of our ideas for solutions. Without changing our housing pattern to more affordability, we're just getting older, whiter, wealthier, more marinish, less diverse. And I think that's not on anybody's wish list. So I don't know, maybe the idea should be have a housing mandate and establish a by right approval that right here in the general plan and the housing element, we say, yeah, we're going to do these things. And not only are we going to have to grow in these ways, but if we can set the objective standard or the other reasons to object or craft development, then we can streamline approval and construction, not just the approvals we see now that are unconstructible. So I'd like to have more of a housing mandate expressed. And also I think maybe we need more of an outreach program to the public, that we will be doing more up, not out, that some of the nature of town will be changing to more urbanized, but there's going to be growth. So the question is how do we manage it? How do we set what we want? Not how do we deny it and push it off? So I like the idea of explaining that participation in the good is necessary, not just in stopping all things. And it would be good to push ahead and get certain other city lands into quicker housing. Village East comes to mind. It's city park lands that are being considered as surplus, but the effort to do things is phenomenal. If we could get it by right during this process, then I think we could bring in affordable housing at a quicker rate. And maybe some attention to the grant opportunities. I don't know how that we fit that into the existing conditions. We assess how good we are at scoring grants or facilitating affordable housing developers to score grants. Santa Rosa's been kind of cleaning up on that corner. We've been reading the paper and hearing it from staff and other nonprofit developers. I think Petaluma has to figure out how to score higher in the funding, because clearly the funding is not local. Affordable housing funding will not come from a development built in Petaluma to help a nonprofit in Petaluma. That's such a small element. There has to be outside funding, and the state recognizes that. The state's making mandates that we grow, but they're also putting affordable money on the table. We need to make sure that we get good developments funded with that money. And then we get down in the PowerPoint, and slide 6 says we're aging, diversifying and affluent. I think that it's a question, I guess. Can we extrapolate that the demand for service workers will go up with aging and affluent, but that the housing for workers will go down? And is this consequence reflected in climate sections? Like staff mentioned, everything's related here. So it worries me that we're trying to go in a climate positive direction, and our demographics are pushing us in a climate negative, and that's housing related. I also have concerns that the comparisons for 2010 to 2020, I think the last 5 years have seen spiking in housing costs, and partially because of fire, partially because of other things, partially because of wage inequality. And so does the data consider the recent rapid increasing? I mean, it has me worried we're considering slow, longer trends when we're right at a hot button moment. We're also in the GHG discussions. We're a little focused on the development side of things and not as much on the existing condition that is the existing people. I mean, clearly, this is not a challenge in new building. All new building will comply and will write the strictest codes in the state. But the question is how do we get the existing condition, the existing housing, the existing people to change? And so in that regard, I do echo Councilperson Barnacle's concern that existing housing is where the bigger numbers will come from. New housing is a very, very small component of what we can change and quickly. Also, when we drop in an abbreviation like VMT only once in the whole report, if it could be spelled out, that'd be great. And then also, we look at 5% growth in Petaluma, and I'm looking at the housing over the last couple of years is less than 1% growth. So there's trends that don't follow in short term that maybe do make sense in a longer view. I think we need to be more granular on some of this. I mean, there's so many documents that talk to us about jobs at 12 jobs for every one house. And, you know, it's just no wonder that we're increasing our commuting. The GHG from the past, the past 10 years is unchanged, but now it's all due to on-road transportation. So, you know, the balance has shifted heavily in that direction. You know, there's all this data just begs for interpretation or some way to nail down and then to figure out what the right direction forward is. In slide 39, there's it says important policies on housing, but it doesn't mention all the state pressure that we're under for the SB 9, SB 35, SB 330, Marina, et cetera. Basically, we're not independently in charge of our destiny. You know, we work in an interconnected way with a larger community as well. You know, as Councilman Barnacle says, there's just so much to dig into here, and you know, I can keep reading these and coming up with comments, and you know, all the way down through public art and utilities with recycled water and the challenge we have to reduce reliance on potable treated water and increase urban need on recycled water. So I think I'll say more for later, and I will send all this in to staff to consider comments. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Councilmember King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank David Garcia, Heather Hines, and Ron Whitmore, and the others who worked on these reports. There was a lot of data and information in there, a lot of interesting reading, and I say that without any sarcasm. I found it fascinating to read about the community in that context, and I also appreciate all of the public input that has come from this that was listed in the report, as well as that which came in this week during general public comment. And I know staff has received all that and will hopefully factor that in to their final documents that are going to come back before the council at various stages. I have a few comments tonight. I'll probably submit more in writing, as I'm quite frankly going to have to go back and reread some of this. It's the context of it is such that you read it and you read it again and you realize you might need to read it again to have a handle. and that gives you an idea of how many subjects were involved and how impressive putting all this together was. I just a couple of the comments of my colleagues. I think that I appreciate all the comments so far. The population growth projections, what I read was at least through 2040 was through ABAG. There was a projection from 2040 to 2050 referenced, and I can't recall where that came from, but I too thought that it looked a little low, although looking at the statewide demographics and the regional demographics with what's happening in the last 2 years, I think it's going to be very difficult. This is a time frame, 2022 and 2023, that's going to be difficult to project population. I think there are a number of things happening right now, COVID being one of them, housing costs being another, probably a lot of other factors where people are leaving California, leaving the county. And as a result, the growth in Petaluma is slower, which in many ways is a good thing, in my view. But, I don't know if there's any other way to deal with projecting that in a general plan beyond what you've got in there, but I concur with the comments. So what hasn't been said, all right, so I'll try to deal with what hasn't been said. One is I appreciated in the land use, and it was in other sections in different reports of the existing retail centers along Washington and North McDowell, or parts of North and South McDowell being reimagined. Obviously, I think the difficulty is getting the owner of the land or the owners of the land to participate in that reimagining, but I think that should be part of the plan, and I appreciate that being in there. I think those are some real opportunities to redo some existing land uses that are underutilized, we'll say, at a minimum, and some housing opportunities along that corridor, many of which are near the downtown smart station. On the subject of retail, obviously retail has changed dramatically in the last 10 years at least. And so in factoring in that into planning, I have concerns about retail as part of a mixed use package or requiring it, or new retail, actually. I see many empty buildings around the city, downtown and elsewhere, that were retail or are being converted. And because of the changing nature of retail, which I think is, at least for the next 5 to 10 years, fairly permanent, that policies requiring new retail should be avoided. If someone wants to build, that can be done on a case-by-case basis, but the existing spaces that we have probably are adequate for walk-in retail in the city, given online shopping and so forth. I wanted to comment about the urban growth boundary, and I realize this is a land use decision, but I'd also want to comment that it really is to me, as equally important is the sense of community you get from having our urban growth boundary and having had it for the last 24 years or so. Unlike a lot of cities in the Bay Area, Petaluma doesn't bleed or sprawl into other cities nearby. We have the boundary, we have the community separators, and I think that strongly fosters a sense of community and community involvement in the city. Not just what we see here at City Council, that's part of it, or we see in the volunteering for our committees and commissions, but the activities on nonprofits, on other activities throughout the town, sports and so forth. It's a little difficult now again with COVID, but pre-COVID, this is a very active, involved community. And I think a big factor is that we haven't sprawled out into the greater Santa Rosa area or the greater Bay Area. And I think, in my view, keeping the existing urban growth boundary in place and only expanding it in extreme, for extreme reasons would be my preference. I really feel that it's important to keep it where it is. With respect to greenhouse gas, I appreciate your reference to Sonoma Clean Power on a basis of someone who's been involved with that agency and how that's dealt with buildings. But I think one of the things that we need to look forward to doing, and part of the plan should be a reduction of natural gas in existing buildings. We've done it for new buildings. It's going to be difficult, but there should be efforts made. That goes to the issue of indoor air quality. It goes to the issue of greenhouse gas and reducing the methane that comes from natural gas. I'd also like to see, there was a reference in the executive summary about policies permitting battery storage for electricity. I think one of the things that if we're going to have solar, and we do have a fair amount of solar and wind, there's going to be a need for storage, and that needs to be factored into the plan going forward. Oh, and I'll just say one thing about transportation, and I appreciate the data, and I've said this, I haven't said it lately, but my prediction, was prior to the governor's prediction, this is going to be very difficult, if not impossible to buy a only gas-powered car by the year 2030, in my opinion. I think the trends for those who read about this car vehicle is that a solely gas-powered car is going the way of the dinosaur. You might still have plug-in hybrids, you might still have hybrids being sold, but I think some of the transportation greenhouse gas is going to be reduced based on what's going to happen in the market. Nonetheless, I think it's important to recognize that that is still the area where it needs to be worked on in order for us to meet our goals, as well as buildings. So those are my comments. I'll send in, if I have anything in addition, I will send them in writing. And again, thank you for the very detailed and involved.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Posake.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to try to keep my comments a little shorter and try to compress them into something that I'll send to the staff. I certainly appreciate all the work that's gone into this. At the same time, I agree with really the vast majority of, well, let's not say vast, but certainly a majority of citizen comments regarding errors, omissions, and comments about the future. And I think it has been tough for everyone to limit their comments simply to existing conditions, in part because we're thinking perhaps more about where we want to go, all of us in government and residents, but also, if we're trying not to think too far ahead when we're thinking existing conditions, then we don't like to see a lot of comments about Rainier being probable or inevitable, where there are no comments about Corona and very few about Caulfield. I suppose that's one of my main comments. I think there certainly is a lack of information in the existing condition related to the river and the wetlands and the wildlife corridors, as some of our speakers have mentioned, relative to the comments about traffic and some other, and land use, certainly. Not that these aren't important. I certainly I agree with Councilmember Barnacle about the need to relook at land use and decide what we can do to push landowners and developers to go in the, to let's not say push, let's say incentivize them to do the things that we would like to see them do, whether it's in regard to commercial property, residential, or a movement from commercial to residential. I also agree with Councilmember McDonald in terms of some of his housing recommendations, as well as Councilmember King in terms of the repurposing of some of our shopping center land. And, you know, I've had some conversations on my own with folks that are involved in that. And I see it's going to be very difficult, but I do think something else we have to look at. And lastly, I would make a comment in support of what Councilmember Barnacle spoke about considering the environmental justice issues inside folks' homes, not just outside, and that this is going to get to be a bigger thing if housing stays the way it is and maintenance is deferred and we make no progress in that regard. I'll leave it there, and I will send something to the staff, but you know, it's very difficult. We have all these things we want to do, and we haven't even considered that we're going to have another emergency of some sort, you know, sooner than we want to have it. So thanks.
Thank you for that wake-up call. Councilmember Healy.
Thank you. So I too want to thank staff and the consultants and the GPAC for all the incredible amount of work that went into these documents. And I just want to briefly share a few thoughts that sprung to my mind in reviewing them. I do agree with Councilmember King's comments that we need to rethink the degree to which we're requiring additional retail in development. That issue has actually come up quite recently at the Planning Commission level with the Riverfront project, with a proposed assisted senior living facility that was proposing some kind of first floor pedestrian friendly / retail. And it kind of got a mixed review there. And I think people are kind of still living in the pre-Amazon world. If we want to see those kinds of important facilities move forward, we do need to seriously rethink those kinds of policies. And then I also agree with Councilmember King's comments about wanting to stay within the existing urban growth boundary into the future if we possibly can. But at the same time, we have folks saying, well, this piece of property needs to be off the table and that piece of property needs to be off the table. And I don't particularly support cannibalizing the fairgrounds for housing or for other needs. So that's going to be a challenge for us. One thing that really jumped out at me was, and Ms. Hines alluded to this, was the slide showing the in-commute and the out-commute for Petaluma, very substantial numbers. And that raises to me the question of whether our VMT and greenhouse gas targets are too narrowly focused on little micro inside Petaluma issues, as opposed to trying to incentivize folks to live and work in the same town. And I'd be very curious to see what kind of policy options we might have in that area to try to promote that kind of behavior going forward. In terms of housing, one thing that occurs to me is that in recent years, we've really relied upon the 15% inclusionary to meet our lower income RENA category targets in both ownership and rental. And that forces us to over achieve in the market rate categories, which I don't know is the optimal way to go forward, but I'd like to see more policy options there so that we can, hit our lower income RENA targets without wildly overachieving in the other targets. I do think, and I've told Ms. Hines this previously, that we need to have a conversation focused on what our traffic metrics are, whether it's just VMT or if it's going to be VMT and level of service or something else. And I think people who haven't been around this process for a while seem to think that the reason that both Rainier and the Caulfield Southern Crossing are in the current general plan is because the council at the time liked those. And the actual reason was that the consultants and staff at the time told us that in order to have traffic circulation that didn't fail our targets by general plan build out was that both of those were needed. And so I don't see how we really have a conversation about crosstown connectors without having before that a conversation about what traffic metrics we're trying to achieve. And I certainly appreciate that people are trying to do, you know, much more bike friendly and pedestrian friendly things. Those are all things that the traffic engineers can model and will model for us. But that still begs the question of what the standard is we want the community to have. If we're only doing VMT and you have a 2-mile trip, then the answer under VMT is going to be 2 miles. But if it takes 10 minutes or 40 minutes, that's really important in this community. And that actually is kind of important for the greenhouse gas implications of that as well. And then the final point I'd make right now at this point is that I think we really need to get the floodplain delineation accelerated to the front end of this process rather than let it slide to the past, because so many of the decisions we need to make really depend on what the new floodplain delineation is going to look like. XP Swim was the state-of-the-art model 17 years ago. It's no longer state-of-the-art. And a lot of people are expressing opinions as to what the new delineation is going to look like, but we don't know. And I really hope, and I'm hoping to get an answer from staff on this particular point tonight, are we going to have that information in the next 60 or 90 days? Because if we're not, I don't see how this process can lead to a new general plan or even a housing element by the end of the year. So I'll leave my comments at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember Fisher?
Thank you. I just want to drop in on this conversation about mixed use and about retail on the ground level. And I think what I read in that that retail white paper is that the recommendation is really to if we're building new development, that we have mixed use side by side. That's not necessarily layered like it used to be. And the ULI actually had the same recommendation. But I think what I read is not that we shouldn't discourage development of more retail, and we can absorb some of it, but to change out the type of retail that we already have. So right now we have very suburban retail, much of it that you can only access with a vehicle. And so what I read was we can switch that kind of retail for more pedestrian oriented, more downtown retail and different sort of specialty retail. So I think it's a matter of how do we activate our street fronts? And perhaps it's not exclusively retail any longer, but other sorts of uses that engage the pedestrian as they walk down the street. So I think that's where the discussion should happen. And then something that I hadn't submitted to staff, but is about the noise section. And I realized that we didn't talk about the racetrack at all, the raceway. We don't talk about gas-powered equipment for lawn equipment and those sorts of things, which are real annoyance. And we didn't talk about loud trucks and where our truck routes are and the impact that the noise of those trucks has, particularly in our downtown. And everything else I will submit. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to jump in right now, and I think the noise discussion that Councilmember Fisher just mentioned is important in terms of what she said, but also important in that as we are moving toward infill, and I totally agree with Council Members Healy and King about maintaining our urban growth boundary. But the price of that is that we are going to have more people living closer together, and noise is an issue. And it butts up against the fact that we have so many, almost all the housing here is existing housing. It's, there's very little being built. and we're making all our improvements on that which is to be built. And we do really need to figure out a way of addressing how existing housing can, meet, continue to exist, but also to meet the overlays that we have of climate, not adding to our greenhouse gases, allowing historic housing in particular, or historic buildings, to go electric, and how can they do that in a way that also preserves their historic character. So I think we need to look at updating those different regulations and marrying them in a way that addresses both those issues. And I think that this is a really difficult conversation, and I think I heard it from just about every council member. We're talking about existing conditions, but all of us really want to talk about the policy of how we're taking those existing conditions and moving them forward, because that's why we're here, and so that is a little bit of a difficulty, and I think it was expressed by several of the people who spoke from the public, and certainly those who submitted comments. What is existing is what is there, and I did hear some people don't feel that it was described well enough. But I do think that I read that the river enhancement plan is acknowledged as the guiding document on our river, and so those rules and standards are in place as existing. But it's just that I would just want to acknowledge that I think this is a difficult conversation, because we want to know how our general plan is going to take these existing conditions and get them to where we want to be. And I think it was the Councilmember Barnacle and maybe Councilmember McDonald as well, who mentioned that it was they thought it was really important to see what worked in the old general plan for our council, for our staff. What was good in that has worked, and what hasn't worked. What do we need to do better? And I think those are that would be worth a few hours of staff time to be looking at that and analyzing that to go forward. But as someone who was around and worked on that old general plan, our current general plan, I will say that I think this is a very different time that we're in than we were then, in that the questions that kept coming up to me in the existing conditions report was, when the traffic study is going to be done that we're going to move forward on, what is that traffic study going to include? Are there traffic studies that do include the kind of active transportation that we are now looking to bring to our plan over the next 15 to 20 years? I don't know the answer to that, but I do want our staff to be asking that question of all the subcontractors that we're going to be using on this. The historic preservation people, again, I want them to be, how do you preserve historically and meet climate standards? How does that happen? And this is a challenge I think for our team that is putting this together, the staff part of this, because it's really very cutting edge, I think. And I really, the expectations are high. And I want to say that I hope that we're going to continue to use the overlays that I've heard our city manager mention a number of times, that we as a city are now using on everything that we do, which includes a climate impact overlay, includes a diversity, equity, and inclusion overlay, because those are the issues that will be able to guide us in terms of looking at how we go forward in this next period. And the existing housing stock, that is a critical issue. about how we get to interact with that, because there's a lot of legal things that keep us from dealing with the inside of people's homes. I know this from the Air District, which has been trying to look at getting rid of bad air quality and looking at that inside of buildings, both residential and commercial. And there are definitely limits there, but as a community, I think we should talk about the idea of having rental standards, that a house has to meet certain standards before it's able to be considered habitable. I know Section 8 certainly has standards that they have to meet in order to be able to receive a federal subsidy. So, why should we allow people to live in places that aren't up to the standards? I think that's absolutely something we do need to look at, and it is part of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I really have to say that public outreach, I do think, is going to continue to be an issue. I know we're trying so hard, and I know that the public wants to get involved more and more, especially now that we have all the limitations on how we can get together. But one of the areas that I noticed in particular that we are having an issue with is our outreach to our Latinx community. And I wanted to bring up this group that's called ELAC councils, which are the English language advisory councils that are every school has one in our school districts. And these are already existent. And I really do believe that they are something that we should be reaching out to every single one to let them know what is going on with our general plan and our district elections, for that matter, as long as we're talking about outreach. So, and it may not be enough, but it is one more avenue. And I think we leave no stone unturned in this area. The other thing, and someone else did bring this up, was an acronym page would be a really nice thing to have at either the beginning or the end of the agenda packet, which might include all acronyms ever used in the city. But it really, it's really difficult sometimes, just even for the council to go, what was that? I don't remember that, and we're learning new ones all the time. So I do want to commend this report. I thought it was actually quite well done. I never saw anything like this when we did the other general plan in the 08 general plan. So I really think it is a very good baseline for us. So with that, I'm going to, I see the council member Barnacle has his hand up again. So I'll go to him.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A few other things that came up for me as I reviewed my notes, listened to other people. In the art section, it would be good, I think, to have a section on the implications of less commercial growth than we've seen on the Public Art Committee and its budget and our ability to continue to be acquiring and placing public art in a world with a lot less retail or commercial development. On the land use side, it would be, never mind on the land use stuff, I'll leave that alone. On the demographic, we're clearly becoming less family friendly. And I think it would be helpful to have some discussion of what the implications are on that for our school systems. Like I've heard that some of our schools are at 50% capacity right now. And what does that mean for Petaluma? And it would be really great. I know this is an existing conditions report for Petaluma, but to just at least, like you pointed to New Mexico or Albuquerque when you were talking about specialty retail as a couple of examples in that white paper, I think it'd be helpful to have a couple of examples of places that are becoming more family friendly for us to consider the policy implications there. In the retail, in the economic development space, I read that white paper thoroughly, actually. It was the thing I read most thoroughly, probably. And I think from a programmatic standpoint, as we start looking forward, there's an opportunity to help our local businesses really start to ramp up e-commerce. We started to do it with Shop Petaluma, but I just feel like there's a huge business opportunity there. But what that brings up, and going back to my message about freight, is there was quite a bit of discussion about last mile delivery and needing to deal with last mile delivery, but not much about first mile delivery or first mile. And that I think there's an opportunity to think about the role that first mile plays in addition to last mile. And then the thing I liked about the specialty retail was like it gave us something to differentiate ourselves by. But I don't think that it's connected to the housing implications. Like our housing numbers right now are given to us by ABAG, and they're not ground truth with the amount of retail space that we need to fill, the amount of service-based employees that we need that are going to be needed to do that. And to Councilmember Healy's point, how do we create an environment where people can live and work in Petaluma? And so, you know, it's all great to use ABAG's numbers as like something we have to do, but I'd like to see it more bottomed up in terms of the amount of retail square footage that we have and what it would, what the implications on our housing stock would be to actually house people in a specialty retail, you know, if we had more specialty retail and fill all of our storefronts with it. It's a little idealistic without that. And that's all.
Thank you. Now, I do believe Councilmember Healy had a question that he wanted to know if staff could answer. And I hesitate to paraphrase it, but I think it was something about floodplain delineation needs to be front-loaded to define that area. And he thought it should be available within the next 60 to 90 days. And I see that Gina Petnick has her hand up, so please.
Thank you, Mayor Barrett, and thank you, Councilman Healy, for the question. The current estimate for delivery on the updated modeling, the HEC-RAS-2, that's the 2D modeling, supplanting the XP swim model, as well as the sea level rise modeling, are being expedited in coordination with the general plan team. So our consultant has met with us and the general plan team, and we put our heads together, and to meet the general plan team's requirement, we are expediting to basically a 6-month schedule. So it will be this summer when we have that modeling complete. That's our current estimate. And that met you know, the general plan schedule, I believe, to basically dovetail with the housing element work. And I know that we have representatives from Ramey and Associates here tonight. Ron is here, and Heather may have some additional comments, but that's our marching orders. So we should see that by summer.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Is there anyone who wants to make any other comment? I did just see a hand go up. Heather.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted, there was a public comment about a zoning code update that is definitely planned for the next step after the general plan. So I just wanted that to be really clear to members of the public that is coming as how we implement changes in the general plan, the policy, the programming that is adopted with the general plan.
Thank you. And Councilmember Healy, followed by Councilmember Fisher.
Thank you. So I appreciate Gina's comments. Summer is a 3-month window, and I was hoping staff could be a little bit more precise within that. I mean, we do have to have a housing element to the state by January, and if it's late summer, that could be problematic. If it's early summer, it's something else. And I was hoping to get a specific date. And And actually, I'm curious to hear the general plan consultant, or Ms. Hines, talk about how we work around that constraint. Thank you.
Gina, I don't know if you have anything more precise in terms of dates with West.
What I am working with is a 6-month expedited duration for all of the model development, calibration, and sea level rise from notice to proceed. And we've just secured our approvals from Sonoma Water for their contribution toward the funding, literally just. So we expect that notice to proceed to go out by the end of this month. And I suppose 1st of February might be a worst case. So if we say February and call that month 2, and I need 6 months from there, we're in August. I would say that that's a safe estimate. We might beat it, but it's middle to end of summer.
And I think that Councilmember Healy, we literally are talking every week on all these pieces, trying to come up with the best possible game plan. We're under extreme pressure on our housing element. We've got all of the best, thinkers trying to figure out how to put this all together. And I don't have an exact answer for you, but we're not sitting idly, and we're really trying to come up with how to do this and meet all the deadlines and be thoughtful and listen to the comments and the direction, and hope to have more information for you shortly.
And I appreciate the extreme pressure and all the complications. Let me ask the question this way. Will there be any possible interim updates or preliminary information that the consultants or staff can provide to the council and the community before we get to August?
In terms of the modeling?
Yes, in modeling results.
I could offer that in the order of work, the scope that is being done, the floodplain modeling and calibration, we should have preliminary flood modeling and calibration, but the sea level rise modeling and that overlay will be probably one of the last pieces to come in, and that will be toward the end of that process.
Okay, so we might get some preliminary floodplain indications before August, but the sea level overlay will take the full time. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to jump in here, Gina and Mike, because I'm aware of this model within Zone 2A. And I'm just curious about whether or not preliminary floodplain modeling loses its validity once you do get the sea level modeling up and running. I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, if you run something and it's preliminary, might that not change once you get the sea level rise input into the model?
In this case, it might, if the models were fully integrated. In this case, the way the data comes to us and is processed, they're really two different models, and we're having to overlay them. So that's why they're being developed in parallel and will be overlaying. But the floodplain modeling is the floodplain model that ultimately will be presented to FEMA for approval, and it meets very strict FEMA requirements, and that floodplain is floodplain, and sea level rise is sea level rise. So we'll have, we should have fairly reasonable calibrated floodplain information, I would think, sooner than the end of the summer. But we won't be able to look at that in the context of sea level rise until we've had a little more time.
Right, because even though they are separate, they may meet.
Well, of course, we know they meet. We know that they interact, of course. unfortunately, the data doesn't interact as we know reality does. So we're trying to mimic that by combining two different kinds of models.
Thank you. Thank you for that point, clarity. Thank you. Councilmember Fisher?
So a follow-up question about that contract and that modeling. We learned in the existing conditions reports that it doesn't include our extreme weather patterns, right? And atmospheric rivers and that kind of thing. So how are we going to factor future weather patterns into this modeling?
I don't have a solid answer for that, Councilmember Fisher. The probability science of climate of that that part of climate change, that atmospheric piece, is something that is sort of a third layer of data. And it is not something that is readily incorporated. So I think we'll probably be viewing that through a lens and trying to characterize our data modeling. We don't have the kind of data to work with in the case of the atmospheric changes that we're experiencing. And it is a very rapidly evolving science that I can't tell you where we'll be with that in a year or 2 years. We're all very aware of it, and our consultants are speaking to it, but I don't know that they can be modeled. I don't know if that can be modeled with the other two things.
So we'll always have an asterisk and a caveat?
Yep.
So wasn't the reason I raised my hand, but I guess I had a question about kind of next steps. Heather, you talked about actually revising these existing conditions reports. Do you have a date that you're going to stop accepting comments on them, and then do a sort of a sense of a time frame of the updates and when those will then go on the website, and will they replace the ones that are there now and say that they've been revised with a date so we know?
So I'm hoping that the comments are, I've in communication with a couple people who are still saying I'm getting comments. I'm trying to get all the comments so we can, really kind of look at, okay, this needs changed in this chapter and this needs added, and then we will revise them. They will be final and replace the drafts on the website.
Okay.
But I don't have I really am hesitant to give a specific date. One, because we've got to get some subs involved for certain things, and I don't have that clarity unless Ron wants to pull a date out of his hat.
Just a sense so the community knows when to drop back in and take a look if they want to reread them.
Yeah, I know, like Heather, I hesitate to give a specific date. We're as interested in everybody else as getting these finalized and corrected as needed. So we're not going to drag our feet by any means, but part of it boils down to the scale and scope of the final list of substantive revisions we need to make and the availability of the subs that need to do some of them. So very much on the soon side, but can't give you a definitive date.
And we can push it out in the community update when we have those final reports up on the website.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was going to suggest, is that once you guys have an idea, if you could either make a report at a council meeting, just a comment, that would be good, or maybe in the city manager's report. That's a really good way of catching our ears. So, okay, well, thank you to everybody who worked on this. And, I think it was an excellent piece of work, or compilation of pieces of work. And, I'm really happy that the community has weighed in on it. And we look forward to the moving on in our general plan. And I'm glad we got an early start to this. So with that, I would like to adjourn our first meeting of 2022. Good evening and Happy New Year.
Good evening.
Happy New Year.
Good night all. Thank you.
Record.